Welcome to Hangin Halfhill, the leading podcast in taking breaks. We did it again. Sorry about that. Undermine is out, and we've done the whole story. I've done the raid. Jay's done the raid. Done the whole quest line. I actually got Lore Master about 30 minutes ago. Yeah, and I think we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we do. It was something. It was a good something. That when you say it was something, it seems to have a negative implication. No. Liberation of Undermine was good.
Yeah, the raid is, dude, they're cooking with gas, dude. I don't know, because we only did normal and the first boss on heroic. I raid again tomorrow. We're recording on a Wednesday. And so Gallywix, I feel like I didn't get a good read on that yet. I need to see it on heroic, because usually end bosses don't really become end bosses until heroic, and they get really kooky. But there's also just a lot of story stuff.
Yeah. I think raid-wise, Muggsy, once we do heroic, and I'm only a heroic raider, I don't go to mythic, but I think Muggsy is going to be a little bit of an issue, and we got a little confused with Rick Reverb, and we only did it on normal too, so we cleared it pretty quick, but those were the only two bosses where we had to actually stop and read the dungeon journal and be okay, what are we doing here? Everything else, it was well telegraphed enough that we didn't even have to read the dungeon journal, which honestly, for normal, that's really a sign of good game design, I feel like, where you can just kind of go in and suss out what's going on just by playing the game. I think that's awesome. So that's a really good sign. I think sort of aesthetically speaking, I really like Liberation of Undermine, because I was at the point where I was super tired of Nerebar Palace aesthetically. It's great. I love that dungeon, but it's very doom gloom spider people, strings and on all this shit. And I don't think you could have gone a further direction aesthetically than absolute chaos of Undermine and goblins and loud brassy music, and it's upbeat and it's just high paced. So man, I really needed that. And I mean, I love living in the goblin space no matter what. So it's really cool. I'm really happy to be there.
Though there is one thing that really sticks out to me as unique in this raid, and that's you fight the first boss, and then the next 5 ones you can attack in any order, and that's really weird in a modern raid context. That's the kind of stuff you would see in old vanilla raids and stuff.
Yeah, I love it though.
I really like it great. Because all the bosses prior to One Armed Bandit, so between Vexy and One Armed Bandit, none of them are clearly the second boss or the third boss or the fourth boss. They all just feel like well-designed bosses, well-balanced bosses. So I can imagine on Mythic, you're going to you're going to have 30, 40 pulls on each of those bosses, depending on how good your guild is. And then, you'll hit a wall at One Armed Bandit. And, if you look at Nerebar, that's kind of how that raid worked, is you went through the first couple until you hit either Kaiveza or Brood Twister. And that raid sucked because of Brood Twister. It was just such a giant tech boss wall. And I don't think this raid will have that same problem. But I do see a very puggable future where you're able to just kind of go in on Mythic and just pick out the easy to pug bosses, kill Vexy, and then just Cauldron of Carnage on Mythic, really easy. Or Rick Reverb on Mythic is easy compared to Sprocketmonger Lockenstock.
Yeah, I think it offers this sort of I know how my raid team functions, at least. I don't know if this is the same for most raid teams, but I assume that it's similar. Where you may need breathers, if you're progging a boss and it just doesn't seem like it's going well, you could just be all right, let's table that for now and let's go do another boss. It feels like that sort of palate cleanser will lift morale a little bit. Let's try something different. Or if you are at a point where you kind of already know the way that our team works, this boss is going to be more difficult than others. So let's go focus on the other ones first and get those knocked out. And then we can go do Rick Reverb, which is our bugbear. I think having that sort of freedom of flow is really cool. And also it makes the race to world first feel a little more interesting too, because the racers can go multiple different directions. And so it feels more loosey goosey on like who's in the lead, like not really because it's still like a static number, killed, but like it's more exciting. I guess at the end of the day, it's more exciting, and I think it's really cool. I would like to see it more.
There's gonna be some interesting dynamics later in the season with like raid lockouts and stuff. So like, let's say, you're progging Mythic, and then you're progging Sprockenmonger, Lock and Stock, my favorite name of any boss. But instead of like typically like you would just keep extending your lockout until you take them down. But now you don't have to. You can just walk in, take out Vexy, and then you can just go to Sprockenmonger, and all the other bosses can be up, so you can get more loot if you want. You don't have to like sacrifice prog. And then in addition to that, the raid skip that you unlock is based off the renown track. And so you also don't need to worry about like, oh, we need to like, reset the lockout in order to kill Muggsy 3 times like back in the day. You can just progress your raid lockout and eventually you unlock that skip. And so it's kind of a better flow, because I think that's something we also need to talk about is that there's a renown track now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you feel about that? I think my sort of initial reaction is I didn't really care, but then I started playing and saw it in action, and I kind of fell in love with it right away. I like sort of the drip feed of perks that it provides. It sort of already it feels like a gradual sense of progression, which is obviously what it's there for. I think it's doing its job pretty well.
Yeah, I like it. It is definitely an improvement over like Narrowbar Finery, but it has one critical flaw that it has not addressed with Narrowbar Finery, and that is, let's say you're on a Mythic Prog team and you have raid Tuesday night. So like after reset, you are going to go to raid. The Galagio rewards membership renown track or whatever still has like % damage buffs on it that is time gated. So like, this week we're currently at renown track 2. You cannot progress past that. Next week, I'm going to assume it's 3 or 4. If you're going to get a damage buff increase, you cannot go to your guild's raid and get the renown there. You're going to have to do LFR or normal prior to raid that night to get your % buff for the week, because you need the % buff for actual prog. And so that was the problem with Narrowbar Finery, is that every single week you would have to go clear normal or LFR prior to your guild's raid night to get your finery, so you could turn it in and have the raid buff for your guild night. And that is still an issue with the Galagio, is that like you cannot get it by doing prog. Like you're not going to get your renown leveled up by wiping. And even if you did, it's still better to just show up to raid already with the buff. And it kind of just runs into the issue that I don't think these % buffs should be tied to something you have to grind. It should be something like back in the day with like Ice Crown Citadel. There was like just an omnipresent buff that nerfed the raid. Like if you just walk in it this week, you get a 2% damage buff, 4% damage buff. You don't have to do anything for it. And that's just like the weird dynamics of whenever you're like progging and you have to actually do the content to unlock the upgrades. And multiple difficulties exist that equally award progress,
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I as far as like crunchy mechanical stuff goes, my ability to provide new solutions is limited because I'm a squishy, fluffy-brained individual who enjoys talking about story and world building. But I recognize, that's an absolute problem. Just it starts to chorify the content. I feel like, not everybody wants to go and do LFR and normal every week, that me included. My enjoyment of raiding mostly comes from the socialization aspect of it, but also, progression as a team is obviously that's like the big draw. And you don't really get either of those queuing up for LFR. It's like, it's kind of mind numbing at that point. So yeah, in order to feel like I am at the top of my game, I have to do content I don't want to do. Kind of the same reason I don't do Mythic Plus, but we can save the Mythic Plus talk for another time.
Yeah, I mean, like that's at the core of it is whenever you're designing for a game like World of Warcraft, you just run into these continuous issues of like, on paper, the Galagio system sounds really good and like an improvement over Narrowbar Finery, but because of like the social dynamics of a Mythic raid team, you're gonna run into these issues that like are impossible to design around. Like you need like earning extra power in the raid is a correct thing to aim for. Like need to earn the power that you're getting. But also if you have to earn it, you cannot have them do it via passive gameplay that they're already planning on doing. They're going to do extra stuff because the passive gameplay that they're already planning on doing expects them via social pressures, no gameplay pressure, to already be at the top of their game. You know, you do not go to Mythic Raid and start getting upgrades in it. You need to already be fully upgraded by the time you walk in there. Because like, while the game doesn't force me to do LFR prior to going into a raid, my other teammates who are all competing for the same limited 20 spots might do that. And then they're going to have a flat damage buff over me. And so, you know, that's going to look bad on me as like, hey, why aren't you showing up to raid prepared? You know, because like this isn't, a lot of people hear this and think that this is like a bad thing about the game. I don't believe so. This is more so just like any sort of adult hobby with other people. It's like showing up to the D&D campaign and you didn't bring a character sheet. It's like, just be prepared. You're all a bunch of adults with limited time.
Yeah.
Show up there and don't waste people's time because you didn't prepare. Like people aren't kicking you out because they're such sweaty nerds that they need a 2% damage buff. They're kicking you out because like they're all investing a lot of serious time in this and their limited schedules and you're not putting in the same amount of effort. So go play with a team that puts in a similar amount of effort to you. Like that's just social dynamics with adult hobbies. I don't really think it's a fundamental problem, but you know, when the Blizzard is like the stewards of this adult hobby, you know, Mythic raiding, they do have to design the game in a very unique way because they're not designing a video game at that point. They're designing a hobby.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's a problem per se that the individuals do it. I think that there might be a discussion there about if the culture of that is a problem, but I don't think that culture is mutable. I don't think that that's something that can ever be changed. It's something that you've said before, and I don't think you made up the phrase, but if you did, it's brilliant. You're the first person I've heard put it in exactly this way, and that is that gamers will always find a way to optimize the fun out of a game. And like that stuck with me. That's a great way to put it.
I stole that from somewhere else. There's like some really smart talk out there. It's like an old game designer. I cannot remember his name at the time.
No, I figured it sounded smarter than something you would say. So, but yeah, I think it's a great point, and I think it lends to this where like it's got to be such a delicate and at times frustrating challenge for game developers to provide systems with that in mind, where like you want to do something fun or flavorful, but you always have to think like, how is this going to be treated by the gamer, you know, by the gaming community? How is this going to be exploited, ignored, you know, like again, I'll keep going back to it. Like I'm very, you know, top-down flavor brained. And so when I think about designing game systems, that's where my brain goes. It's like, well, what makes sense within the context of the setting, the story, the world, you know, and how quickly that mentality breaks down when you go into optimization and simming and spreadsheets and, you know, theory crafting and number crunching. And it's just like, well, okay, it's all out the window now.
Yeah, because like all the like number crunching and simming, that is the fun part. Like I adore that in World of Warcraft, is like taking my character and making him like the most perfect damage dealing apparatus possible. Like this is my favorite part of the game. I adore mythic raiding and everything with it. You know, like the idea of like, here's a team of 20 people all like putting their all in to fight this video game boss. So like, you know, I do not think this culture is inherently problematic. The thing is like Blizzard just has to be the one to kind of like tame the beast a bit. But this kind of taps into kind of a greater problem I'm having with World of Warcraft at the moment, where Blizzard, it's almost like an insecurity in design, where if they add something to the game, they feel the need to make a whole game out of it. Great example of this is the bronze celebration tokens during the anniversary event had just a lot of nestled systems that did not need to exist. But the more relevant one is the drive system and having to collect all these little parts and crafting them. It's like, okay, there's so much stuff in World of Warcraft that does not matter to the average player. Well, I don't want to say the average player because I don't know who they are. It does not matter to me and probably a lot of other, you know, Mythic Raiders. And then the second that I look at it and it's like more complicated and a lot of effort, I'm just going to say, yeah, it's not, I don't care. I'm just not going to engage with the system at all. So like when I look at the drive system, I'm like, oh, cool, I get to like customize it. and like, you know, make it really my own. And then it's like, okay, now you're gonna have to go kill a bunch of rares to get the 3 specific parts, but you might get duplicates and you're gonna get like 4 different parts. And it's like, okay, you know what? Never mind. I've already completed the campaign. I'm leveling up my renowns on the side, and I'm already going pretty fast. I don't care.
No, I'm with you. I'm fully with you. I think that in the pursuit of making, I think sort of the intent, the design intent there is like, it's going to drive you and motivate you when you get a random drop and it's like, oh, you need 5 of these MacGuffins to create a new part. Then you're going to be like incensed. You're like, oh my god, like, yes, let's go explore Undermine to find these parts. And in reality, because I mean, it happened to me too. You get that, and it's like, okay, I'm already tired. You know, I think that having the parts available for like currency, like you can get new wheels from the scrap people. You know, like it's more boring on paper, but like I look at that more as a tangible like reward to shoot for, because it's like I drop in the cans, I get the wheels, I slap the wheels on. It's a simple transaction. You know, like I know what's expected of me. It doesn't feel as laborious, as like a chore as it does, you know, go and find the 5 infinity machine parts and assemble them, and have to worry about doubles. The doubles part kills me, dude. I think if you have one of the pieces in your inventory, don't give me a double, because I'm fully checked out at that point.
Well, crazy thing is you can find them on the auction house, but like so like you could just like go and buy them all at the auction house, but like that's the point. I don't care. And like when I loot a thing off a rare and I read the description, it's like, combine this with the steam boil oil injector and the steam boil water tank, and it's like my eyes are just glazing over at that point, because I'm just looking at a blob of green text that's just listing off things, and I go, yeah, I'm not registering this. There's already so much stuff that I need to like think about as a WoW player. This is just gonna be automatically like just tuned out.
And, you know, as somebody who does love, you know, the story and the world building and prioritizes that all the time, that is one area where the world building and the flavor can actually get in the way of the gameplay. My raid leader actually pointed this out during Liberation of Undermine, where he was like, I hate the goblin shit sometimes because it feels like reading a technical manual, you know, and like I'm sitting here trying to read the dungeon journal, and I have to read through all of like these like high concept, you know, mechanical terminology, because they're going all in on the flavor, and I sort of lose the plot. And I think that's interesting, because that's, to me, that's another thing where it's like all of these parts have these like wacky technical mumbo jumbo goblin names, and it's like, oh boy, I suddenly don't care, because this all sounds the same and it's overwhelming.
Well, yeah, because like, you know, you're in the shoes of like, let's say a mythic player, and you're like picking up this little dry vehicle part, and you're like, you know, I've already got to worry about like the upgrade system, getting my hero track gear, running level 7 mythic plus dungeons to get crest, but like 4-10 dungeons to fill up my vault, or 6-10 dungeons. And then I also need to do the raid, and I need to get enchanted, and I need to craft stuff, and and it's like, oh my god, I don't have the bandwidth for this, Blizzard. I'm tired. And like I just keep running into this issue in War Within right now, where everything is like a whole video game, and it's like, it doesn't need to be. I think something that a lot of players might agree with is like the whole Siren's Isle thing was cute, mostly annoying, because in order to have your relevant ring for content, you need to just go do some stuff you don't care about. And it's like, I like it when there's just that's why I say there's like an insecurity in this. It's the idea that Blizzard, you know, back in the Borrowed Power era, this is way more of a problem, and it's just kind of a lingering insecurity of, you make these game systems, you invest hundreds of hours in developing this content, and you're like, well, I want to make sure players do it. Like, that's the stated reason they do this by Blizzard years ago, is that they want to make sure players actually do the content. That's insecurity. You know, instead of, you know, taping some gameplay systems to force me to go do it, make good content that I go do for fun. Like time rifts back in Dragon Isles, like there wasn't anything I had to do there. I just thought it was sick. So I went and did it sometimes, you know, like if I saw it was like the turn of the hour and time rifts were up and I was nearby, I was like, ooh, it's the Warhammer inspired Azeroth alternate timeline. That stuff's cool. I'm gonna go check it out. Maybe I get a cool mount.
Mm-hmm. So for me, the nature of the content in patches and and whatnot, like I will basically do whatever content is put in front of me and complain with minimal fuss. But I think for me, content like Siren's Isle, the weight of it is determined by the story content, and I think that what they really need to adhere to is committing to answering a question or asking a new question, or most ideally answering a question and ask a new question. And Siren's Isle may have done that, but we don't really know. I think it was Bellular who put out a video suggesting that Circe Circlet is meant to be our answer to crossing the storming sea, because that's effectively what it does, is it allows us to navigate the storm. And I really commit to that. I want them to commit to that. You know, like when the time comes for us to go to Avaloran or whatever, I hope they, if it's still in our possession, I hope we whip out Circe Circlet, or the Night Squall whips out Circe Circlet. I don't care. Just call back to that and show us, like, yes, that is what was happening there. That is that story beat. So that way, even this sort of seemingly throwaway content or like forgettable content factors back into the larger plot, you know, and it doesn't always have to be something that moves the story forward. It can be stuff that fleshes the story out. For example, I mentioned to you before we recorded, I really wish that we had explored the origins of Kajamite in Undermine, or the origins of the species of goblin kind in Undermine. Now, I understand that that's a little bit more high concept than sort of the wacky fun vibe of the patch. But
well, if you let me cut in there actually is a whole side quest about studying Kajamite, and it provides 0 answers. So like, you may say that like, oh, you know, that's a little high concept, doesn't fit in. That's what psychos are for. And there was a side quest all about where you go with a scientist to do like Kajamite stuff. And he talks about how like Kajamite has all these properties we never even thought of. And it does all this. It's like, okay, tell me more.
Yeah.
That's more, you somehow gave me an answer. That's a question. And like, and when I'm getting like kind of exhausted with questions, that really annoys me, is like a scientist just going, oh my God, Kajamite does more than we thought. And it's like, what does it do?
Yeah, no, like I said before, the World Soul Saga is meant to be a time for answers, and I know that we are still in the first third of it. We're in the first act. This is still a lot of setup and asking more questions that we're going to be answering, but it is still a time for answers, and not every patch has to be, you know, big answers time, has to be revelatory time, but like answering the smaller questions. This is a great opportunity to answer the smaller questions. And I think the nature of Kajamite is a big question, but in the grand scheme of things is a small, big question, and is something that could be answered now, I think. And the fact that it's not leads me to one of two conclusions, and that is either that it is such a consequential, massive thing that they can't reveal it yet, or it is so inconsequential that we're never going to get an answer. And the first one seems unlikely, and the second one seems incredibly disappointing.
I think we kind of are in an interesting spot right now with the World Soul Saga, where, you know, so right before we recorded this, they just announced 11.15. And our main reaction to it is annoyance.
Yeah.
Because the content looks fine. The gameplay is probably fun, but it's like, you know, we just ended Undermine, where we got this like sick ass Koresh reveal with the Dark Heart and the Ethereals, which I want to point out 100% called it. I'm so cool, so smart.
Yeah, we do need to circle back around and talk back. We do need to circle back around and talk about the story of Undermine. Yeah. But 11.1.5 for now.
Yeah, just like we got that announcement. It's like, dude, seriously? Like, please. Please. Because, like, when it comes to the World Soul Saga, I am expecting a roller coaster ride, twists and turns. You know, like, I am grabbed by this narrative. I am locked in. And it's just like, stop doing nothing. Like, every patch is, like, a month and a half. So whenever I see 11.15 and it's like, yeah, we're going to, like, do some stuff with, like, Ajka and Hollowfall. Because we're going to fight more Nerubians. And it's like, oh my God, another month and a half of waiting with no answers? You're going to leave me with this cool-ass teaser at the end of 11.1, and you're going to make me wait 4 months to hear anything about it. That's absurd.
Yeah.
In any other context. Like I was like, okay, 11.15 has been listed as a PTR build for a week and a half at this point. And so I'm like, okay, the reason they haven't revealed it yet is because like we're gonna see the epilogue. And then when we saw the epilogue, I'm like, oh, I was so right. They can't reveal the PTR because it's gonna be all about like we're gonna learn what Xal'atath is. We're gonna learn what Koresh's whole deal is prior to going there in 11.2. And I was like, you know what, Blizzard, you've done it. You're starting to lock in. This is the World Soul Saga that you planned. I'm here. And then it's like, you're going to be fighting Nerubians. I'm like, oh, like, sorry, I'm getting a little heated. It's just like,
yeah. Now we do need to say, and we cut in here on you. We do need to say what we know about 11.1.5 comes from a single post that is a handful of paragraphs. So we have limited context. So if we're going in on it a little bit, we do that with the caveat that this could be way more plot relevant and way cooler than we currently know. So we are only going on we are only operating on the information that we've been given from this single post. So yeah, we're giving it room to breathe.
The patch doesn't have a name yet, and that's weird. So maybe that's like maybe there is a bunch of story content and what they're announcing is just like the fun side activities. So maybe, but still it's just like, we always talk about how this is part 1 of a grand arc and we have this so much runway left. And it's like, we really don't.
No.
We have one more patch in the War Within because almost all the, like right now in Warcraft's storytelling, all the actual storytelling is done in major patches. And I do not think that's acceptable in the World Soul Saga. That's what I was hoping would change from Dragonflight to War Within, is that every minor patch would be actual strides forward in the story. You know, you would like, they had this great patch structure in Dragonflight, and then like, all right, now we're going to tell a story. I'm like, perfect. You guys just invented this cool new patch structure. Now you're going to be able to tell really cool stories with that. And they're just not doing that. Like, Undermine should not have been, like, the entirety of its story was really good and a lot of cool stuff. It was also resolved in 7 days. And now we're going to have 5 months of waiting for the new story stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, to go back to the nature of the content as we are aware of it, it feels so bizarre is the only word I have for it. It's just so strange because we are fighting the Nerubians in 11.1.5, and Ansark is dead, and at this point will have been dead for a while now. I don't know how long in game, but it feels like it's probably like at least a month, you know, and like,
well, in-game follows IRL time now, so it's been like half a year.
Okay, well there you go. And sorry, that distracted me because that means that we were literally convincing Gazlo for a week. Yeah, it's such a strange thing. Like, why? And maybe they'll get into it, but I don't know. It doesn't a 1.5 content patch doesn't feel like the place where we're going to get real deep in a narrative. But like, maybe they'll talk about, you know, Sareki loyalists and how they maintain to the ideals of the queen or whatever, and like we'll get into it. But I doubt it. It will probably just be killing bugs, and that's such a strange thing to do now. Like, I'm over it. I'm over Nerubians for now. Like, I'm excited about goblins, and I'm excited about ethereals, and like I wanna move forward. I don't want to fight bugs again. It's such a weird like step backward.
Well, you do say that how much can you do in a 0.5 patch, but I want to kind of contrast this so far with 10.15, which was a massive story patch. Like, that's the entirety of like the Murazond, like that's when the Dark Heart was introduced and Xal'atath was back in. And I want to point out that I was hoping in War Within that was what we were going to be having, is like, oh, the 1.5 patch is going to be known as like the halfway point. It's going to be the important lore patch of this format. And it doesn't seem like they're doing that. And then on top of that, like I said, I want to point out, we had the Dark Heart introduced in 10.15. Actually, it was introduced in 10.07 with the Forbidden Reach. We are now heading into 11.15. It has been 2 years. I still don't know what Xal'atath really is, what the Dark Heart really is, and we are now over halfway through War Within, on our way to midnight, and I swear to God, if I do not know what Xal'atath or the Dark Heart is going into midnight, I'm clocking out, dude. I'm
Yeah, I'll
giving
be
up.
mad. I'll be mad. I won't be disappointed. I'll be mad. I think we deserve to know. So I don't, at this point, I'm not convinced that we're fighting Xal'atath in the War Within, and there's been a lot of discussion about that. I always figured she would survive till midnight, but I thought we might at least fight her in the War Within. I'm not sure that's even going to happen now. And as sort of the flagship villain of the War Within, she is the face of this expansion. Having zero interaction with her like that is gonna feel strange. But I think that would be softened a little bit if we at least learned her nature, her intention, a little bit more about her. That would be fine. That would be a fine compromise to fighting her. So if we don't get that, then we've effectively gotten nothing about Xal'atath, and I start to question why she was even part of this expansion. She could have just been saved for midnight. So yeah, I'll be mad. So hopefully it doesn't go that way.
Yeah, because we do just get the Koresh tease, so it's like, okay, Xal'atath was planning something around Koresh probably, and the Ethereals are also doing something, but it's like, just tell us. Just tell us. Let us think about it prior to the prior to 11.2 coming out. Let us speculate. Let us have fun. Let us engage with the story. I think that's the core of my issue here, is that I'm not being allowed to engage with the story. I'm just sitting here like a good little player waiting to be just told answers, Like say, have Xal'atath be like, oh, I want to rebirth the Koreshi World Soul as a void thing. I'm like, what? What does that mean? Hold up. Like, let me sit here and stew on that. Let me engage with the narrative. Every time that I'm told something, it is a 100% guaranteed answer. I'm just like told.
Yeah, it's sort of a strange place to be in when you're asking for more exposition, but that's where we're at. I would like to have a little bit more of that. And, I am spoiled, having played, 5,000 hours of Final Fantasy 14. That's not even an exaggeration. I'm obsessed. And the narrative structure of Final Fantasy 14 is so good, and the story is so front and center, and it's just a fundamentally differently built game than WoW. And I don't know that it would be fair to ever hope for WoW to be that, because it's a different beast. It does other things so much better than 14 does. But it does a very good job of humanizing the characters, getting into their motivations, having these long philosophical discussions about the nature of man and all this shit. It doesn't need to get that deep, but the point is, like, I would like to see a bit more humanization and characterization in the characters, learning their motivations, being treated like an adult, reading a story. I think it'd be great, and I know they can do it. We've seen wonderful storytelling in World of Warcraft, even recently with Dragonflight and in the War Within. And so, like, I would just like to see that level of fidelity across all levels.
Yeah, actually, well, the Goblin stuff is phenomenal.
Oh,
Undermine specific stuff, oh my God, they nailed it out of the park. Yeah. And I'm gonna say one more thing, and then let's shift over to a more positive note with that, because I do want to state I am leaving the first week of Undermine positive. This is just one thing that's like I'm specifically mad about right now because they just announced 11.15. I'm just a little heated about this specifically. And like the last thing I want to say on that is just like, I don't need to know absolutely everything. I don't want Blizzard to come out and give me a list of answers, but I want to know enough to where I can feel like I should be listening. Because right now, the only reason I'm paying attention to the story is because like I'm just like have my theories and I want to be proven right and look cool. Like tell me what Xal'atath is, tell me what the Dark Heart is, and let me come up with some, make her seem like a threat. Because right now I don't even know what she is. How am I supposed to be scared of her? I don't know what she is. She's just like a pretty void lady. And then she has like a cool dark crystal that she carries around. I don't know what either of those things are. So I'm not thinking here like, oh my God, what horrors could she unleash given that she's a void lord or a fifth old god. And then she's holding the, a dark heart of Azeroth or something, like let my mind go crazy. Give me something to latch onto here. Cause right now you were just the frustrating thing is the story is just sitting there being like, ooh, question mark. And it's like, no, say something. Please, just say it. Say it. Stop just doing question marks. We've had 3 cutscenes now of people ominously holding the dark heart looking at things.
That's what I mean when I say that this is the time for answers, those are the kind of answers we need. And to sort of bridge from the negativity to the positivity, I'm going to throw out that old adage of, we're criticizing it because we love it, and that is the crux of it. The War Within and the World Soul Saga have fucking ruled so far. It has been consistent, banger after banger. This is, in my opinion, I can only speak for myself, this is the best state that World of Warcraft has been in since probably Legion, maybe ever. I am willing to go that far. World of Warcraft right now is very good. We are eating very good. The content cadence is amazing. We're already talking about 11.1.5. The music is phenomenal. The theming is phenomenal. The raids have been phenomenal. Everything is fucking good. We love this game. So that is why we are pointing out what could be better, because it's like 9.5 right now, and we can look at it and go, this could be a 10. We are this close to a 10. So that's the only reason that we're pointing it out, I think.
Because the Undermine story stuff is so good. I love the characterization of the goblins. So, I remember when we recorded a podcast prior to this, we were talking about what do we expect to see. I think it's like the first episode. They did it. What I wanted to see was like World of Warcraft say something. Now, was I expecting Blizzard Entertainment, a multinational corporation headquartered in Irvine, California, to encourage me to engage in revolution against my government? No, I didn't expect them to do that. But then they did it. The whole story is about, do you give up on something you think is hopeless, or do you believe in the people, stage a revolution, and get rid of bad actors on the top? I swear to God, they could not be hitting you in the face more. Like, that's the whole point. Like, when you hear all your friends be like, oh, I want to move to Canada, or I want to move to Sweden because, like, stuff's so bad here. The entirety of Undermine is entirely about that reaction and dismantling it. And I'm like, oh my God, Blizzard, that is, like, poignant. From World of Warcraft, the stupid MMO from 2004. Whoa. I am impressed.
We own these streets. And, I think we mentioned this before too, but like the goblins, they are very reflective of our culture here in America. And part of that is that they are shitty little guys. They're shitty little guys. And at the end of the day, though, these shitty little guys, they look out for each other, and they love their home, and they have things that they believe in, and they're people with hopes and dreams, and goodness in them. And all it really needs to, all it should take in theory is one shittier little guy trying to push everyone around. And then we realize, we remember who we are, and what we stand for. So yeah, it was incredibly poignant. And honestly, I think this is I had to think about it because I cry pretty easily, but I think this is the first time that World of Warcraft has made me cry. I think that, so yeah, props to them for that. Blue Dragonflight questline in,
that one got me. But that's because I was going through some stuff in real life at that time.
No, me too.
Loss.
Me too. That one got me. Oh man, boy, I'm gonna get real personal on the podcast, but it's fine. I'm going through some stuff with my grandfather right now, and the Earthen who is losing his memory in the Isle of Dorne. I forget his name. That feels terrible, but that absolutely wrecked me. So yeah, that one got me too.
To get a little personal, my parents recently became unemployed. Literally 2 days before Undermine came out. Family business of 40 years. My granddad's, they inherited it. They've been running it. It went under overnight. So that was like, I remember like I was helping my parents take everything down during server maintenance for Undermine. Like I was out of town, like helping them like pack everything up that they'd done for years. And then I came home and played Undermine, and that was a wild experience. I was like, oh, let me play World of Warcraft. I'm like going through it right now. Let me have like a little safety bubble. And then the game just like grabbed me by the shoulders and it said, think of the world you live in and what it does to people. I'm like, I know, man, I know. Blizzard, please. Though I do want to come to the defense of the goblins being quote unquote shitty little guys. There have been many lines that have had me thinking of some things. Have you noticed all the lines about traffic tickets, building inspections, and legally mandated breaks?
Yeah.
Nowhere else in Azeroth do they have that. So one, that implies that there's a goblin governing body that is thinking of safety and has traffic laws to break, building safety codes to violate, and unions and legally mandated breaks, okay? The hoarder over here bonking peons on the head that are sleeping on the job while I'm taking my legally mandated break and Undermine. This makes goblins go from the worst employer to Azeroth to retroactively the best ones.
Yeah.
So I will not take slander against goblins ever.
I can't argue
Nowhere else has traffic laws. That makes everywhere else in Azeroth seem dangerously unsafe by comparison.
You go to court in one of the goblin quests. So yeah, there's a whole legal
pandas
system.
have court. We know that. They're the only ones to have a court, I believe. So it's pandas and goblins. Also, I love the detail of all the Pandaren and Undermine. There's a whole, it was like a little bit of a drama during the PTR of, there's a lot of like Chinese takeout style place is in Undermine.
Well, yeah.
And they're themed as like Pandaren ones. And on the PTR, they were entirely staffed by goblins. And players said, you know, some feedback that Blizzard got was like, hey, replace the kitchen staff with Pandaren, like the people whose food that they're, you know, making. And then they did. And I just love the idea of like, it's like that vibe of like, because like Undermine is very clearly based off like New York specifically.
Yeah.
So it's like that vibe of like, oh, the front of house is this, but then you go in the back and it's like, there's like a cultural, they're saying something there. It's kind of like how real life works. So like when you walk by a restaurant and you see like the panda and the goblin, like the goblin's sitting on the trash can, the panda's sitting there and they're just taking their breakout back. And it's like, it's the cultural melting pot, and I love it.
Yeah. There's sort of this like in real life, you know, like wealthier people, maybe less now because the world has gotten so much smaller, but you know, like, things from Asia were considered like, exotic, you know, or unusual and were used as like a status or wealth symbol. And I think that like, that's reflective in goblin culture where like these things from Pandaria, this is, you know, magical land long shrouded in mist, you know, and so like, I think that like, maybe Pandaren culture has been revered and uplifted in goblin culture as a status symbol. And that's why we see Pandaren influence. Also the proximity, you know, from Pandaria to Kazan. They're fairly close to one another. They're like island nations-ish. So I think that's really cool. It's a really cool touch of world building. And actually adding in the Pandaren there is really cool too. Because obviously,
well, it's not just Pandaren too. You have like anytime that there's any sort of like resort or line, because like any touristy locations will have other races of Azeroth, and I find that cool too. Like when you go into like the actual like residential districts with all the where people live and stuff, 100% goblin most of the time. And then if you go to the marina or if you go to the restaurant scene, I love that there's a specific food district that is full of tourists. Like the world building is just fantastic.
Absolutely.
And
I've noticed a lot of Drakthir, and I don't know if that's just because they're easier to spot with their wings and they're tall or whatever, but I noticed them more than I noticed other races. And at first I was like kind of put off by that because it felt like, oh, let's put one of the newer races up front and center. But realistically, like the Drakthir would be the most inclined to get out in the world, you know, like they've just woken up after thousands and thousands of years of stasis. And it's like, oh my God, there's so many things to see out there. And like, the Undermine ostensibly is a happening place, so it's like, yeah, of course.
Yeah, Drakthir and Undermine is like the Victorian child fed a Mountain Dew come to life.
Yes,
it's like
absolutely.
One thing that Undermine has added to Goblin mythos that I absolutely adore is just their unexplainable love of slime. Like, there's this one quest line where you're like helping build like a golem to help city streets. And there's a bunch of kids that are like, oh, our day sucks. Can you help us out? And then you accidentally spray them with slime. And you're like, this is the best thing ever. It's like, oh my God, I love slime. And it's like, okay, those are some weird little kids. Yep. Then there's another quest line where someone is trying to convince the slime divers, which is a job that exists, that they should wear eye protection because the slime is toxic. And then when you go to explain it to them, like, hey, you should wear goggles so that your eyes don't bleed out of your head. They say, oh, but I really want to appreciate the like eye to slime contact, really see and feel the slime. It's important to me. I'm an artist. And I'm like, Okay, so all goblins are just weird with slime for some reason. Like every explanation they gave was like, no, I need to become one with the slime. I don't want to wear protective equipment. I'm like, what the? And then they try on the goggles. They say, oh my God, my vision is clear. I can appreciate the slime in ways I never could before. And it's like, calm down. You guys are weirdly into slime.
Yeah.
Like they're goblins. Of course they are.
And my cooked story appreciating brain always wants to kind of take that to like, oh, it's green like Kajamite. Maybe there's a connection there. There's a deeper meaning to that. But then at the same time, like the higher functioning part of my brain is like, sometimes things can just be weird, And I think it works better in that way where it's like, I do want a deeper story for the goblins, but they need to maintain their goofiness, and that's a great point of like goofiness where it's like, we like slime. It's just what it is.
So I actually kind of want to challenge you to a bit of a creative exercise here.
Okay.
Maybe we should make this a segment whenever there's a new zone. If you were to add a quest line to Undermine, what would it be? I will start off with my pitch.
Okay.
If I were to add a side quest to Undermine, what I would do is you know how there's like a fake ceiling in Undermine with like clouds and sky and stars, and sun and moon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would have a quest line where you go up there and install sprinklers. Purely because you are employed by someone who wants to start selling windshield wipers to all the people in Undermine.
That's fantastic.
And after you do this side quest, you now unlock rain in Undermine. But I would love the idea of like installing sprinklers purely to sell windshield wipers to people's cars. Like a goblin goes up and he sees rain and he's like, oh my God, this is a business opportunity. I need to bring this to the people of Undermine.
That's pretty fantastic. I like that. You kind of put me on the spot. I think that there are quests for the environmentalists within Undermine, and I think that's really cool. Like they even make a point of being like, don't look at me like that. Just because the bigwigs don't care about the environment doesn't mean us little guys don't. I think that expanding more on that would be cool. I, in my real waking world for 12 years, have been a zookeeper. I think I may have mentioned that on the pod before. Mm-hmm. But environmentalism, conservation, these things are near and dear to me professionally and personally. So exploring that more in this, this realm of decadence and excess and waste, like really having a message about the importance of conservation, talking about the natural ecosystem of Undermine before it became the city, and how maybe there's like a contingency of goblins that are seeking to establish like an animal sanctuary for the native wildlife there, like that kind of thing would probably be incredibly boring and preachy for some people. I would have eaten that shit up. So, obviously there would need to be a little bit of injection of goblin shenanigans in there. Otherwise, what's the point? But I think as a through line, really like exploring that would have been really cool.
Oh yeah, because there's like that one area with like the exotic animals, which is like full of cameos of just random mobs.
Yeah.
So like maybe you could like do something there of like turning it into a zoo.
Yeah. That would be cool. Yeah, like learning to appreciate those animals and transforming it.
And his kid, who's locked up for some reason.
And his kid. Well, it's not actually locked.
Yeah.
They're just playing.
To think it is, though.
They're just playing.
Don't tell her that. It's not locked.
Yeah.
Those are just all the little touches. Also, like the most gorgeous rat you've ever seen.
Listen, I've got my best friend. She is a rat aficionado. She does not play WoW, but she loves rats. I've really got to thank the world designers for Undermine that I have been able to flood her with nonstop screenshots of rat-related comedy for the past week. Because they're even like the Scrungly rat, fantastic, phenomenal. Scrungly. And of course the most gorgeous rat is incredible. Yeah, it's great. It's rat enjoyers are eating good in Undermine.
Actually, there's one thing that I need to complain about in the world building of Undermine. The one thing that just keeps bugging me. At first it was funny, now it's pissing me off. Well, not pissing me off. That's not true. But so in one of the side quests, you like help a wedding, right? And you get a Gopstagram influencer to come to the wedding, and you pay them to come. And it's like, haha, funny. Gopstagram. Wait a second. What does that mean for world building? Is there social media on Azeroth exclusively for goblins? And I saw someone post on the lore subreddit that Gobstagram is probably just a physical billboard, and I'm like, that'd be funny. I hope that shows up. But then today I was doing the post raid quest where you figure out who gets to own the Galagio, and someone randomly says, I'm going to post something about this on GobTube. And I'm like, okay, hold up. There cannot be okay, my only problem with this is I would love if goblins have social media, but you could come up with better names than Gobstagram and GobTube.
Don't just slap Gob and something and call it, yeah.
That took 30 seconds, okay? You could do better. GobTube and Gobstagram. Come on. Like, why not Instagreen, you know?
Yeah, even if you had to do Gob, I think even Instagob lands better than Gobstagram, but that's just me.
Gobstagram. And GobTube, dude. Good Lord. If I see Gobbed In or Gumbler, I'm done.
Welcome to the realm that I constantly inhabit, where you are fighting. There are, two forces inside of you fighting, where it's like knowing that these are just jokes not meant to be taken seriously, and the impulse to question everything and the lore and setting implications of their existence. Just like, I know I shouldn't be taking it this seriously, but this impulse inside of me is like, there's social media? What does that mean?
You guys don't even have phones. How does that work? Yeah.
Don't you guys have phones?
To just be like, haha, like Instagram influencers? Oh, God, man, influencers. Are they the scum of the earth? I'm like, Blizzard, hey?
Yeah, hi. About that.
I wouldn't call myself an influencer, but I feel like, okay. Now I need to see Gobbed In. There needs to be some commentary on current job application environments.
Yeah, incredibly predatory because it's the Goblin way. No, I think Undermine in general. I think Undermine in general was a massive flavor win, as they say. I really have minimal complaints with the way it was presented. It's basically exactly what I wanted, exactly what I was expecting. It's super good. I mean, they nailed it. So they know goblins, that's for sure.
What's your favorite side quest? I can go first if you want to.
Yeah, please do.
Stew on it. I'd say my favorite one is the bank heist one. Specifically because I love how much it plays into the jokey explanations for goblin races. I mean class combos. Like the goblin shaman has like deals with his like elementals. He's like, oh yeah, they'll get a cut, like I'll give him a cut of my cut. And then like at one point you're like running away and you like grab totems off the car and throw them at who's chasing you.
Yeah.
And then the fire elemental pops out and he's like, raw, I'm a fire. Oh man, we're an Undermine again. Oh, I hate this place. I just thought that was so funny. Just an elemental popping out and be like, oh man. And then you throw the water elemental, and then the frost mage in the car says, hey, wait, that's my frost elemental. And the shaman goes, sorry, I was borrowing it. Just like, again, playing off those like Warcraft jokes of like, hey, wait, why do mages have water elementals? And like shamans also have water, like, well, shamans don't have water elementals because that's a mage thing.
Right.
But like a shaman would have water totems. I love those like in jokes because like, the whole like goblin shamans exist because they make deals with the elementals. They sign contracts. Like it's always like a deeply stupid world building thing that I love. And I love a quest that like just makes a joke out of that. And also goblin mages, And of course, just the fact that you have like a heist quest, like that is like something they needed to do.
Of course.
Is like assembling the crew.
Yeah. Well, I think my answer was going to be the one with the car chase, which was your answer. So I agree. But so as to not be boring, I will say that my favorite would probably be the post-raid quest determining the owner of the Galagio. I really like the public defender that they introduce. And he's got like a whole family, and he's just like buddies with Noggenfogger, and like he's sort of casual chaotic, and I really appreciated that. I absolutely, and spoilers if you haven't done this quest, go do this quest because I'm gonna spoil the best part of it right now. It introduces the nephew of Jastor Gallywix, who is Rosebud Gallywix, and everyone they make a whole big thing. Everybody that you know, all the goblins you know, are like, "Oh God, yeah, Rosebud. He's a great guy. We love this guy. We trust this guy. Give him the Gallagio. He'll knock it out of the park." You go and meet Rosebud. He's the nicest guy in the world. He's the opposite of Gallywix. He's got this great, character design. He's got this funny hat. He's set up as like, "Oh, this is going to be a character," and then he fucking dies. They just immediately. They just kill
dies. Him. A bomb just drops in front of him and kills him. Speaking of Rosebud Gallywix, I just realized this. The other day, Platinum posted... Well, not the other day, like months ago. Platinum posted a video where he talked about how a random Ventrico goblin was named something Gallywix. And he's like, is this a relative of Gallywix that we've never heard of?
Yeah.
But then Rosebud is the nephew of Gallywix, which would mean that Rosebud, that means Gallywix's brother's kid.
Yeah, or sister, yeah.
That other Gallywix from the Venture Company is Rosebud's dad. So now we retroactively know who that guy is. It's okay. Gallywix's brother. And it was just like an unexplained thing. And I just like that they totally made up Rosebud Gallywix and called him his nephew to explain that one little quibble and lore of like, who's that random other Gallywix that has nothing else associated with him. It's Gallywix's brother.
I love that. That's the kind of world building I love. I do love, this is such a minor thing. I don't even really have much commentary on it other than I liked it. In that same quest, when you're at the courtroom, I don't even know if you noticed this, but when you're defusing the bombs, the second bomb is... You go up and there's a goblin that's like, "Oh, you flirting with me? Oh no, you're just defusing that bomb. Never mind." That goblin is Gazlo's mom. I don't know if you saw.
Did not notice that was Gazlo's mom.
Yeah. Her name is literally Gazlo's ma. So I love that. I love even if they're not like featuring prominently in the story or whatever. I like having these little like world building.
What's the name of the bad guy goblin for that quest whose name is just like sounds like a pasta sauce?
Tarbonara Steam Crank or something like that. But yeah, Tarbonara. Which I love. That's a fantastic name because it's just carbonara with a T, and I love that. Also, the judge of that scene is Landro Longshot, who. He was the NPC back when the back when the World of Warcraft trading card game was a thing and you could like redeem the cards for in-game items. Landro was the dude that you would give the codes to in Booty Bay. So he just had a random cameo, which was really fun.
There's one goblin that I'm sad did not show up.
Wonderful. I have one too, but you go first.
The great Azakazam from Dalaran. Because I... did not notice he was missing until in Undermine in the Liberation of Undermine, the raid. There's just this one mini boss mage
in the Gallagio, right?
I was like, "Is that the great Azakazam?" And I clicked on him because I didn't remember his name. I googled him, like, "Shit, it's not him. It should have been him."
It should have been him. You were. I mentioned that in the raid. I'm fully with you. That should have been him. Absolutely, because he doesn't even have a fun name. This other goblin. He's just some guy, the Magnificent or whatever. But yes, it should have been. Akazam Zarak. Absolutely, it should have been. The goblin that I miss, that I think deserved some sort of appearance, is the inimitable, the one-of-a-kind Dr. Boom from Netherstorm, who was kind of a throwaway dude in actual World of Warcraft, but he became his own character in Hearthstone, where his card was just oppressive at the beginning of the game, and then he became more of a character in the Evil League of Evil. He became one of Rafam's henchmen. So he became his own thing. I think he deserved a little bit of a World of Warcraft renaissance, and he never showed up. And I know at one point when I was defusing those bombs in that quest, the post-Gallagio quest, I was like, oh my god, I'm defusing bombs. Now, almost certainly this is Tarbonara doing this, but what if? What if Tarbonara is Dr. Boom?
Actually, if I had to pitch for where Dr. Boom should show up,
okay,
it should be him and a bunch of just villains from the Hearthstone League of Villains. Should be out just golfing.
We
should just see them all just hanging around a caddy in a golf cart, just like just golfing. It's like, hey, Dr. Boom, aren't you like evil? He's like, I'm at the clock, man. I'm just golfing.
We tried to steal Dalaran. It didn't work. We're just here on a break.
Well, now there's no Dalaran to steal, so
what are we gonna do?
While we're here.
we was building the rockets and it blew up. Yeah. I think that'd be good. I love Dr. Boom so much. I wouldn't have minded seeing him being one of the raid bosses. I just straight up give him the full treatment. It would have been great, but it's fine. It's fine.
I do love all the raid bosses. My favorite has to be One Arm Bandit from like a flavor perspective.
Oh yeah.
Because if you read the description, it's like, this is the most unfair slotting machine ever. However, it is completely fair. Its rules are just made up and not told to you. And it will kill you if you break the rules. And it's like, I love that. A slot machine and it has rules. You can't know them though.
The only thing I don't like about the One-Armed Bandit is that my best in slot is best in slots, which appears to be the best in slot weapon for 70% of players. And so that's going to be a trick to get that.
Oh, I adore how on his loot table, there's a ring that is random stat +1 luck. And that is like the best ring in the game. If it drops and if it rolls your 2 specific stats in the specific order you want them to. And it's yes.
God, what a
my
nightmare.
slot machine boss needs slot machine loot. I like that it has random stat gear that drops off of it. Like it has a ring that's like 5,000 plus random stat and then 1,000 plus random stat 2. And it's like, that stat distribution is like perfect for a ring. Everyone wants a ring with that stat distribution. However, you better hope it drops, and you better hope it drops with your stats in the right order.
That's a nightmare.
I know, it's going to be so funny to get that ring. Imagine trying to get it off Mythic. Like, how many times are you going to kill Mythic One-Armed Bandit, the third to last boss in the raid?
Yeah.
Most people, once or twice.
Yeah, speaking of good flavor in the loot, I really like Rick Reverb's stuff. A couple of them are just blatant references to popular 90s tracks. There's the Semi-Charmed Amulet and the Wondrous Wall, which I really like. I don't know, Six, you're a little baby. Do you know Wonderwall? Do you know Semi-Charmed Life?
Nope.
You don't know Wonderwall?
I know it's important.
Wow. All right.
My favorite part about the raid is all the vehicular manslaughter.
Oh my God, yes.
All night, people in my guild were getting just ran over.
Yeah, it was...
The funniest thing is one of my guildies got clocked by a truck, and then everyone's like, haha, you got ran over. And he said, oh my God, I was just teaching my kid how to look both sides of the road earlier today, and now I'm the jackass getting ran over.
We didn't watch anything before we went in fully blind, so we killed that first trash pack, and then we were like, okay, where do we go from here? Where does Vixie spawn? And obviously she just comes roaring in and peels out and kills half of our raid that just explode in this bloody mess. and it's such a great welcome to Undermine, bitches, moment. It's so goblin coded. It's so insane.
Yeah, killed half my raid team.
Yeah, it was so funny. And she does that. I don't know if you know this, but she does that every time that she spawns.
Every time.
Yeah.
We reset it and our raid lead died both times.
And it was still funny to me. And my raid leader was like, I think that might get annoying. And I'm like, I think it's amazing. I don't think I'd ever get tired of this.
Well, you won't. You only get. I love those bits and raids where this will only hit you once.
Yeah.
Now. But I like how Blizzard just kind of surprises you sometimes. It's like, hey, what if the raid boss just runs him over?
Right. And it's like,
it won't hit him the second time, but the first time it'll be really funny.
And if it does hit you, you don't take durability damage, and it's right outside of respawn. So it's the most minor inconvenience. So
I will say I'm a little worried for pathing through the raid. I can only imagine pugs are going to have very strong opinions of the quote-unquote correct way to get from boss to boss, and will get very mad if you don't go the correct way that you're supposed to already know. Because you can go any direction in that raid and find your way there, and there's a lot of trash. Our first clear through the raid was so much trash, getting butt pulled all over the place and not knowing the route. I'm sure next, a few weeks from now, we'll all know the skips to just skate behind a building so you never have to pull any trash between bosses, which might be fun. Just having such little trash between bosses in this big citywide raid. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah, it's absolute chaos, and I love it. I was having Old Dwar flashbacks because I'm an old man, and I used to raid back in Old Dwar, and in the Mimeron area, there's sort of that Frogger path that you have to cross, where if you get hit, you just explode and die, and very much that was that with like the racers racing around.
I like if a raider gets hit by a car, they turn into little giblets.
Yeah, no, there's no body. You just explode.
You're just and there's just a permanent red stain on the floor.
Yeah. No, it's all incredibly goblin coded. Have we talked about Drive yet? Like if we like Drive, how we feel about Drive?
I hated it for the first 10 minutes, and now you cannot take it from my cold dead hands.
Well, my reaction was similar but different. I hated it at first, and now I'm fine with it. I'm not madly in love with it, but I like it well enough.
Do you know how good it is for just fidgeting?
Oh, if you just need to stim in some way, then sure,
like laps around Daldron. No, I'm driving. I'm just doing drifts around Incontinental.
Yeah, no,
that's how I can make it through a podcast recording.
Yeah, no, I think that it's cool. I like the implementation of it in Undermine. If this is the blueprint for dynamic ground mounts, I hope that they refine it a bit. I
have a controversial opinion on dynamic ground mounts.
Everyone
always says that because it's like, this is another pet peeve I have. Do you remember when they added, this is going to sound wild. Do you remember when they added augmentation evoker to the game?
I mean,
they took a 2-spec class and they added a support spec as the 3rd spec.
Yeah.
And then everyone just said, well, now Demon Hunter needs a support spec. And it's like, oh my God, this is such a like circle peg goes in the square hole thing where it's like you saw a 2-class spec get a 3rd spec that was a support spec. And now you're like, well, that means that naturally the other 2-spec class is going to get a 3rd spec that is a support spec. The WoW community has a habit of doing that. And I think they're doing it again with skywriting and dynamic ground mounts. Like they saw skywriting, it was successful, and they're like, well, obviously, now we need to apply it to the other mount type. And it's like, no, they don't. I think ground mounts are fine, and Drive is a fun minigame. I don't think we will ever need to add dynamic ground mounts to WoW, because I'm gonna be honest, it'd be weird.
I think my only pushback to that, and I can't push back too hard because I haven't played it, but I know that Guild Wars 2 has what you would call dynamic ground mounts, basically just mounts that have their own style of traversal. And they successfully took the flying design from Guild Wars 2. And so that's, I think, maybe what is compelling people to say, well, let's take the ground mounts from Guild Wars 2 also, where they have mounts that, and again, I'm kind of speaking out my ass at this point, but as I understand it, there are mounts that like are jumpers or climbers or like faster runners, like these mounts have specific design to them. And I think that's
But then you kind of run into the issue of like everything that's flying kind of does the same thing, just moving through an empty void. But you can't drift a horse, Right.
Well, that's what I mean is that like maybe the mechanical ground mounts would be kitted out with sort of like the drifting spec, and then maybe like the goats or whatever would be able to climb steeper inclines a bit easier. Things that could conceivably jump have a better jump function, that kind of thing. I'm not married to this. If they never did this, I wouldn't be heartbroken. But if they did,
that's kind of what I'm saying
neat.
Is that like with a game as old as World of Warcraft, I think dynamic ground mounts is like the one thing that you just cannot go back and add. Like that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
Because now you're saying is like different mounts have different gameplay things, and it's like players don't care. Like like we're talking about like all these like things that are too complex and players don't care about. Imagine if you're sitting there questing and you're like, I need to go over to this location, and you're saying, oh, there's a big hill there. Let me pull out my goat mount from BFA. And let me climb up that angle. Like that's just too much. Like people just want to get on their favorite pretty mount that they got from the trading post or whatever, and just get from point A to point B a little faster.
Yeah, I do. Like that's kind of why I fizzled out when I said I'm not married to this, because like I always view it from my lens, and my lens is just sort of this chaotic lens where I hit my random mountain button, and whatever mount I'm on, that's what I'm riding. And so the enjoyment I would derive from it would be like, random mountain button. Oh, I'm on a frog. I guess I get to jump real far while I'm, mounted right now. But like the reality is that a lot of people play with a more optimal frame of mind where they're going to say, what is the most logical, efficient mount to use, and then it's like you need to have every mount on the bar because it's like, oh, I need a climber right now, I need a jumper right now, and that becomes like, like paperwork at that point. It's like it's laborious, it's not fun, and I get that.
Actually, there's a good example of this already in the game, and that's like the Water Strider mounts.
Yeah,
it's because like that is a mount for a specific purpose, and a lot of players just kind of default to that mount because like it does something other mounts don't do. So like that's what would happen if they were to make dynamic ground mounts, is people would find the one all-purpose mount and then just use that one all the time.
Yeah, and that
and then like let's say like your favorite mount ever is, this flying mount, and then there's also most flying mounts can be used as ground mounts. So then you have like a whole nother can of worms. But what I'm saying is like, what if your favorite mount that you've been riding around for 10 years, 12 years, 20 years, and it's like your favorite thing ever. And then dynamic ground mounts come out and it's like, hey, this mount is really good at swimming. And you're like, what? I don't want that. I want to go fast. Like the guy on the tiger over there. And it's like, well, too bad. You're going to have to switch mounts. You may like that mount, but it's kind of shit unless you're in a specific situation.
Yeah. No, there may be, the Guild Wars implementation of this. There may be ways that they make it work, but it's nothing that I've really interacted with, so I can't speak to it. But if you're going to, you have to provide a baseline for all mounts, I think, because if you make one objectively worse, then you're going to be upsetting some contingency of people. Yeah. You're going to be upsetting the River Beast enjoyers out there, who I guess I'm one of.
Shout out River Beast.
Yeah.
River Beasters. Because like with skywriting mounts, all mounts are just functionally identical, and I imagine if they ever did dynamic ground mounts, they would be functionally identical. It'd be like insane to like try and make them different. But then also, ground mounts do move differently. Like every skywriting mount flies through the air. They all just do that. Like the animations are a bit quirky because like you have Mimiron's head having the same things as Ban Lu the tiger, and then also dragons, but like they can all just spin to go fast. Versus a ground mount, like you have snakes, you've got horses, crocodiles, cars. What's some really kooky ground mounts? There's just a lot of weird ones out there. You got sideways crabs.
There's a chicken.
Slimes. There's chickens. Yeah, like it's just like if you add a dynamic ground system, it would feel like dishonest if you're drifting a horse, like I'm saying. Like you would have to implement different drive systems. Kind of like they did kind of play around with this with Skywriting, where the Storm Rook, if you pre-ordered War Within, like had a different boost mechanic, and then they immediately backtracked on that.
Yeah.
You can now just get any Skywriting mount to do that. Like they played with it for a second, and then they said, no, this is dumb.
Yeah, I kind of loved it, kind of hated it. I love it in theory, and maybe that's kind of where they're at, whereas they love it in theory too, but then in design they're like, nah.
Well, that's how it is. It's like we're talking about how sometimes like things are over designed. There's just too much to them. Like with the ground mount situation, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, if we sit here and we think of ground mounts in a vacuum, we can design these really cool ideas, but like ground mounts do not exist in a vacuum. They're really just the thing that lets you run fast from point A to point B. So with all the things that World of Warcraft players have to care about, is dynamic ground mounts a thing that they really want to care about outside of the vacuum where you're just thinking about ground mounts?
What I would want more than dynamic ground mounts is for every mount in the game to be able to fly.
I've always wanted that too.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. In Final Fantasy XIV, every mount can fly, and it creates some incredibly ridiculous moments. Like one mount is a gorilla, and instead of riding on the gorilla's back, the gorilla holds you in one of its arms and then runs on 3 arms. So you're just being held by this gorilla, and then it can fly. And so now you're being carried around by a flying gorilla, and it's the most insane thing in the world. And I love it. It's like my favorite mount in the game because of how stupid it is. And so like, yeah, a flying hippo is goofy, but you know what else is goofy? World of Warcraft. This whole damn game is goofy. It fits in perfectly, and I don't know.
Well, I'm sure the champion god-slaying hero of Azeroth is able to just ask a mage to make their hippo magical,
Yeah, and I don't think necessarily that it's a flavor aesthetic limitation. It's probably just the fact that there's like thousands and thousands of ground mounts that would then require flying animations, and so that's a big undertaking, but I think if they could ever devote the resources to it, it would be really cool, and I would get to use a lot of mounts that I don't currently get to use.
Yeah, because that kind of is what happens. Like when I go to the trading post and I see a new mount, it's like, oh, that's cool. Maybe I'll use that. Oh, it's ground only. Well, I only have one keybind, and I don't want to bother with some macro shenanigans.
Right.
Like, I'm just gonna put my one mount that I always use on my mount keybind, and it has to fly because I need to fly a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the Horodons. I think those are really cool. I mean, I'm a big dinosaur boy, so I would love to be able to fly around on a Triceratops.
But wow, we have really gone off topic here talking about mounts.
Well, that's just the nature of the game, right? You start talking about Undermine, and then you end up talking about flying dinosaurs. It's just what it is. That's World of Warcraft, baby.
This is the World of Warcraft, baby. All right, I do think this might be a good stopping off point. Do a bit of a shorter episode today because of all the there's been a lot going on. If you're wondering why there was a break, I've had a lot of internet issues. I had 5 days without internet, and so I had to actually be introspective for once. I would not recommend it. I also played Minecraft, and wow, don't do that.
Yeah, well, we are back in the cadence now, and as we're wrapping up, I do kind of want to throw out there, this will be the first episode on the official Hangin and Halfhill channel. We're going to have the previous episodes up also in case you missed them. This is where uploads are going to be taking place now. We're going to continue to try to do this every week. We love doing it, and we love hearing from you guys, so make sure to leave some comments. One thing I really want to do is get some guests on the show and talk to some people in the community. So if you have anybody that you'd like to hear us talk to, big or small, it doesn't really matter. If they are in the World of Warcraft space, throw them down in the comments and we'll see what we can do. I mean, we're not going to be getting Holly Longdale and Metzen yet, but, giving us an idea of who you'd like to see us talk to, we can start where we can and have some great conversations. I'm really looking forward to that sort of aspect of yapping.
Okay, that's the episode. Bye.
Bye.